Please give her a hand.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Social Nest Foundation, for also having UNESCO at this important meeting. And it's also my first time in Spain, so I'm very excited. So I'm Nana Boateng. I'm an economist. I'm from Ghana. And just a bit about my background, I was born in Italy, but raised in different parts of Africa, in Ghana, Kenya, and Tanzania. I also lived 14 years in South Africa. And no, my parents were not fugitives. I've been asked the question. But I have an interesting multicultural background, and now living in Paris in UNESCO, and working with the Management of Social Transformations program. So I wanted to share a little bit today about what we have been reflecting on in our program and some of the important lessons that we've learned. And they're just really two lessons that I wanted to share with you today. So the first one is that we feel as a development community, we've been focusing on the wrong things. Focusing on growth, especially income-based GDP growth, has been very taxing on the planet. It's also put a lot of emphasis on extraction, on consumption, consume, at the detriment of the environment. We also feel that the income-based growth has understated inequalities. We're very concerned about the levels of inequalities. And yes, we hear data being thrown out that extreme poverty is getting better and things like that. But we also know this is really largely driven by China, who had a per capita income of about $300 in 1990. And this went to $10,000 a year in 2015. So we feel that inequality is still a big problem, and it's actually been growing and largely going unnoticed. I wanted to read, some of the statistics on this. So we know there are about 3 billion people living in countries with high vulnerabilities in climate change. In every large region of the world, except for Europe, the share of the bottom 50% in total earnings is less than 15%. The top 1% of carbon emitters contributed significantly more to global emissions growth than the entire bottom half of the global population. So those of us who are also involved in climate resilience, what are we doing about this 1%? I think we tend to focus more on the bottom and put the burden on them to fix this. Over 780 million people globally are currently exposed to combined risk of poverty and serious flooding, mostly in developing countries. You have an estimated 70 million people worldwide forced into poverty. It goes on, 9 out of 10 people breathing air containing high levels of pollutants, et cetera, et cetera. So what we see is that we need new metrics. We need to focus on well-being, we need to focus on dignity, environmental healthcare, welfare, happiness. These are important metrics also to pursue. The second lesson for us is that the problems are really intersectoral. Oftentimes in the development community, we may focus on health or just education or agriculture or one sector at a time. But actually, these problems all speak to each other and they feed off of each other. So addressing problems in an isolated way is actually not so useful. And we need to look at problems in a more interconnected way. I remember listening to a presentation from the Poverty Action Lab, and they were wanting to understand what improves education outcomes. And they looked at Kenya, a part of Kenya. So they tested different things, textbooks, teacher training, things like that. And the one variable that was the most significant was actually deworming of kids. So it was a health issue, which was significantly affecting children's ability to learn, their cognitive abilities. So it just goes to show that if we are stuck in our domains of expertise, it's very easy to miss out on bigger pictures. I also had an experience with when I was working in the agriculture sector with a consultant who we had going out to a community in Nigeria to train them about good agricultural practices. So in the middle of his training, he sees a bunch of children going up and down the hill fetching water, brown water, really dirty water. And he calls me and he says, look, I cannot continue with this training. In this community, they have bigger problems. We need to look at the water problem, which was a dilemma for us because we're economists and agronomists, and this is not really our area. So what do we do about that? And I think this is really the complexity of development. It's not just in the scale, but how interconnected they are. So in the MOST program, we're looking at these trends, and we want to do things differently. We're one of the few programs that are truly multidisciplinary. We believe that addressing social problems, we need to look at things not just from the economic sociology perspective. We need anthropology, we need philosophy, we need ethics, we need language, history. All of this plays an important role. So for philosophy, for instance, we've been asking the ethical questions when it comes to climate resilience. To what extent do we want to facilitate certain extraction that could help with green technologies, but this comes at the expense of the planet? There are ethical questions to be had. The French sociologist and philosopher Bruno Latour, he said, if the humanities had been prominent in the development discussions, the environmental crisis would have been treated differently. After all, the crisis we're in is because of how we as humans interact with the planet. So we believe these philosophical questions are really important. We believe language, history, they foster peace and social cohesion. They are very important for social transformations. We also have a team that deals with futures and foresight. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this group because they are the group that instill a kind of a futures thinking, building capacities for to anticipate your anticipative capacities. So which is also really important in taking a very long-term view. It's good for intergenerational equity and so on. So as I'm running out of time, I just want to conclude with what I think is really important is that we need to look at equity. In our quest for growth, innovation, development, people are getting left behind, and we don't pay enough attention to this. I think we need to do that. We also need to apply different mindsets, different disciplines in all the work that we do. And the humanities, I feel particularly, is often left out of these discussions, and they're really important. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.